My name is Bill Inman, and I'm the city co-leader for BitAngels LA, along with Peter Pastuca, whose name I just mentioned a few moments ago. I'm really excited to introduce our keynote, which is going to be delivered as a Q&A with Dr. Ben Goertzel. Many of you who are on the phone today are familiar with Ben, I'm sure. He is well known worldwide as a main thought leader in artificial intelligence. He's also known as the father of artificial general intelligence, or AGI. You may be seeing a lot more of this in the news today. It's Ben's term. He founded and brought forward the idea. He'll talk a little bit about his background in a second. He also created the AI behind the Sophia robot. You might have seen present at the UN or on the Tonight Show. Also was the first robot citizen, and continues to work on that project actually as well, and then flourishing that technology into new spaces like nursing. Ben's also the founder of Singularity Net. It's the decentralized AI marketplace, the blockchain-based AI marketplace that is an alternative to big tech. And that's going to be a big part of the discussion today. I'm lucky enough to work with Ben. Ben and Singularity Net created an offshoot company called Singularity Studio, of which I'm the CEO. Thankfully, I was able to use my pull today to get Ben. Came off. He flew to the East Coast a few days early to do one of the main podcasts that you're going to see. You can mention it, Ben, if you think it's appropriate. So that there'll be hundreds of thousands of views. So we're glad to have him here today for a much smaller group, but we're thrilled to do so. Of course, we'll be recording this too and distributing this to our network of investors across the world, and that'll be exciting. So Ben and I are going to have a discussion, and hopefully those of you that are watching, and Erica, you can confirm this, you can see everybody's video here, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we're going to have a discussion on decentralized AI. I think you'll find it very fascinating. Again, we want your questions. Please put those in the chat. I'll be monitoring it. And let me start by Ben. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your time. Love to have you talk about your background and how you got where you are today, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely. So I got a PhD in mathematics in the late 1980s, but long before that, I was already very interested in artificial intelligence, and in particular in what we'd now call AGI, artificial general intelligence. I mean, creating AIs that can really think like people do, and even beyond how people can, rather than just solving highly specific narrow problems. Although, of course, AIs that solve highly specific narrow problems are also super interesting and valuable. So I mean, I was an academic for 8 years in math, computer science, and cognitive science, trying to work out on a research level the theory of how minds work. So you could take a theory of how mind in general works, use it to understand humans, and use it to figure out how to make digital minds. And then in the late 90s, I entered the software industry. I'd been doing sort of entrepreneurial and consulting, and then open source R&D stuff, both on AGI and an application of AI to pretty much every domain you could think of. I mean, robotics with Sophia, but a lot of health tech stuff, and we're working on some COVID-related applications now, fintech, national security, sort of, you name it. And, you know, it's never been a more amazing time to be working on AI. AI is now, you know, big business, big government, and everyone can see that it's going to dominate the whole world economy and the whole situation of humanity for the next few decades, which leads to the importance of, you know, democratizing control and governance of AI, which then leads us back to blockchain as the main focus of this group.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Ben. You're obviously, you've been at the forefront, been in the industry for decades, and we're going to see complete scale hockey stick growth of AI. They're predicting $15 trillion added to global GDP just by AI alone, added, not replacing. Although I think we'll see a lot of changes, and you'll probably talk about that in a second as to what AI is going to bring. What do you see as the future of AI? Where are we going with it?
Well, that's almost like asking what's the future of like integrated circuits in the 1970s. I mean, AI is going to pervade every domain of human pursuit, and in some forms that look like AI to the end user, and some forms that don't. So I mean, there's going to be artificial general intelligence, which is as smart as people or even smarter than people. There's going to be sort of ambient, narrow AI in every device that you use and in implants in our bodies as well. And then you're going to have the whole network of computing and communication devices that we interact with, displaying its own sort of emergent global brain type intelligence, in some ways different than the intelligence of the individual narrow or general AIs that are embedded in the network. So it's, and we're going to see cyborgism of various types also. You know, we're going to take these phones out of our pockets and into our heads. And I mean, we're going to then have combined human machine thought processes. So it's going to be quite mind-blowing what's going to happen in the next couple decades, and not many people are fully understanding it. And you know, the opportunity we have now is to guide and influence, you know, how things develop during the next decades. I mean, as well as from a business standpoint, to profit from making the right bets on which technologies are going to be key to this explosion.
Yeah, it's so true. This convergence that AI is at the center at, and of course at XPRIZE with the mirror, they're doing the same thing there, is exciting because even at Singularity Studio, we've seen projects recently for law enforcement AI to help with the problems today. We've seen projects for COVID, and you've been very active in that. We've seen projects for smart city, just really a myriad of different industries. Of course, health tech is very big right now too, so that's really exciting. So this idea of decentralized AI, it's different, right? And there's a philosophy, and I always appreciate your philosophy around this because it's seminal to why we think about this at all, versus big tech as one of the big ideas. Can you explain to everybody what decentralized AI is and maybe how blockchain plays a role?
On a conceptual level, the notion of decentralized AI is not remotely new. I mean, the AI pioneer Marvin Minsky in the 80s advocated the notion of a society of minds. So the idea that an intelligent mind could be composed of a bunch of agents that had their own particular intelligence, and then by cooperating together, they manifested some broader intelligence, right? So there's collective intelligence even within what we think of as an individual mind. Now, you know, when Minsky articulated it, it was more on the conceptual and cognitive science level than the software implementation level. And when in the late 90s, I first set about trying to implement systems like this, there wasn't a lot of tooling there to support it. I mean, we did have distributed computing, we had cryptography there. You could actually create a society of minds with no central controller and its own self-organizing logic to its growth and organization, but it was quite hard, right? So then when I saw the Ethereum blockchain come out with the Solidity smart contract scripting language and the notion of a Ethereum-based world computer put forward by Vitalik Buterin and the other Ethereum founders, I realized, well, we were getting to the point that there was a technology infrastructure you could use to make a society of minds, which will be a bunch of AIs that have their own individual intelligence, and their interaction gives rise to collective intelligence on a higher level, and where you could build this in a way that was fully decentralized and self-organizing with no central controller, and it would be sort of feasible to do using current technologies. And you know, the value of this is multifold. I mean, I think it's the right way to make an AI that's truly intelligent in the sense of the open-ended intelligence that biological systems have, not the narrow intelligence of, say, a reinforcement learning reward optimizer or something. I mean, biological organisms, they're open-ended, they're redefining themselves, they're expanding their boundaries, they can replace each part with another part as part of their growth. And while some parts are more influential than others, there's a fundamental decentralization of control to a society or a biological organism. And you know, you can reflect that in a digital system using blockchains like Ethereum or now many others as part of the infrastructure. So what blockchain gives you here essentially is a mechanism for decentralized governance and control. I mean, you can do more or less of the actual AI crunching, thinking, and data processing on the blockchain, depending on your design. I mean, if you had the fast enough blockchain, which Ethereum currently isn't, I mean, you could put a lot of the AI processing on chain, or you can put just basic coordination operations between the AIs and the society of minds on chain, and have the AI thinking and high bandwidth data exchange be off chain. With either of those strategies, you still have the value of blockchain for decentralized governance and coordination. And this is interesting from a cognitive theory point of view and AGI design point of view, but it's also interesting now from a practical, political, and economic point of view, because now AI is big business, right? There's trillion-dollar companies. The leaders of every major government have made AI a huge priority, and it's just a matter of time before we're seeing AI be a major feature of geopolitical squabbles like networking equipment is right now. So I think it's very important that the foundation of global AI should be open source, and it should be decentralized in control, right? And the internet is like that, right? And computer operating systems are like that with Linux. Financial system is not like that. Mobile phone system is not like that. We want AI to be on the side of internet and operating systems rather than on the side of things that are siloed off, like mobile phones and money. And we have the chance to do that now because we're still laying the groundwork for the super intelligent global brain that humanity is going to be building over the next decades.
Yeah, and you say the next decades, but it could happen within years too, right? Just depending on...
Absolutely. And this is an ironic thing, because for most of my career, I was saying we may well have a global brain and super intelligent AI within decades, and everyone was like, no, it's centuries or thousands of years. And now if you say, it could be 20 years, you get the opposite pushback. People are saying, well, couldn't it be just 2 or 3 or 5 years? And it could. It largely depends on where we focus our resources. If there were the right focus of cognitive energy and inspiration on the problem, I have no doubt we could create a human level thinking machine 3 years from now. And if effort is largely diffused on other things, it could be 15 or 20 years from now. And certainly with our team in SingularityNet and in Singularity Studio, which is our for-profit spinoff of SingularityNet, as you know well, since you're leading that company, Bill. I mean, with these projects, we're aiming to push as fast as we can toward not only getting to emergent general intelligence running on a decentralized control infrastructure, but to making this decentralized general intelligence be, benevolent and positive for all of humanity. And I think there's a great synergy between technical, humanitarian, and business goals here. Because if we can use decentralized AI to do tremendous good for all of humanity, I mean that's the biggest market opportunity that's ever existed in the history of our species. It's the most interesting technical and scientific endeavor humanity has ever undertaken, and it also can make the difference between us living in sort of utopia until the end of our universe, or until we plot an escape from our universe, as opposed to humanity annihilating itself and being succeeded either by bleak nothingness or by non-human AGIs that we've created and have recycled our body into extra hard drives.
Yeah, Ben, I agree with all that. And I know how hard you're working towards AGI, and a low-level symbolism is to see the term that you founded, human-level intelligence, AGI, now popping up in the news so much more often. There's a consciousness around it. We'll see how fast that evolves and how fast that accelerates.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about how we got to get this out to market, right? Decentralized AI. We got to have enterprises really make this a utility.
Well, yeah.
How is this useful to them?
So Linux is a quite interesting example, right? Because that was... It's open source. It was founded even by some people like Richard Stallman, who are radically anti-business. But I mean, in the end, what has propelled Linux to its current position of dominance on the integrated circuits of the world? I mean, it's largely major corporations leveraging Linux to achieve their own particular goals. and in doing so, growing the whole Linux ecosystem, right? And I think decentralized AI has to be the same way. I mean, like Linux, it has a tremendous amount to offer all sorts of businesses, and businesses, by using decentralized AI networks, will put more intelligence and more resources of all sorts, human and computational and financial into these decentralized AI networks. I mean, this is why in my own doings, in addition to the SingularityNet Foundation, which is a nonprofit that's just fostering a pure open protocol for fostering decentralized, society of mind among AI. So anyone can put an AI out there online into the SingularityNet network. It can talk to the other AIs in the network. It can expose its APIs. It can find AI services it wants by putting peer-to-peer requests out into the network. It can collaborate with other AIs to fulfill someone's query. The foundation has built this network, and we've rolled it out in beta, and there's some cool AI in it already. But in addition, we've spun off Singularity Studio as a for-profit entity aimed at creating and licensing products serving the AI needs of large enterprises, where the AI inside Singularity Studio's products has some special proprietary aspects, but also makes rampant API calls into this open decentralized network. And I think, we've worked already with Cisco on some traffic analytics in a smart city context and other smart city projects. We've done a bunch of biopharma work, which is now touching on COVID, as we may get time to discuss in a moment, a bunch of fintech work. So I think by leveraging a decentralized network with all the diversity that it brings to supply the AI brain power, or part of the AI brain power behind enterprise AI products, I mean, you can allow, say, a Cisco to analyze traffic movements in the city more accurately than it would otherwise, or a pharma company to personalize therapy to a particular patient better than it would otherwise, or a fintech to analyze, risk in a certain collection of financial markets better than it would otherwise. So you're making enterprise AI products that do the job better than anything else out there. But part of what enables them to do that job is the diversity of AI tools in this decentralized AI network, right? And so then you have a synergy between the commercial products you're licensing and the open decentralized network behind the scenes, which is, it's not unlike Red Hat versus Linux, or IBM versus Linux for that matter. So, but it can be bigger, of course, than any of those things, because AI is bigger and closer to the money and closer to the heart and mind than operating systems.
Yeah, love all that, Ben. Great explanation. There's so much more to talk about. We could talk for. What I'm going to do is I have a couple more questions, but our Q&A is blowing up, as you might imagine. And what's interesting about what you just said is that last month we had a solar blockchain company and also a publishing blockchain company present. This time with Sergio and Hassan, we actually have infrastructure companies that are completely relevant to your conversation. So that happened kind of randomly. I just met Sergio last week, so glad he's here to present. Ben, I'm going to move to the Q&A. This is really fascinating. I wish we had more time with you. We've got some really interesting. I know Amir is going to have an interesting presentation in just a second. Let me go into the Q&A if that's okay with you, Ben. Fire some of those at you. How is AGI different than AI? And by the way, keep in mind we only have about 5 more minutes. So how is AGI different than AI?
AGI is a subcase of AI, which involves AI systems that can generalize and transfer knowledge significantly beyond what they have been trained with or programmed for, or what they have experienced so far. And that takes a bit of creativity and imagination. COVID is an interesting example, because narrow AI machine learning models trained to help with other diseases don't tell you fuck all about COVID. And AGI, trained on data from other diseases, could port some of its knowledge to deal with something new that has some unforeseen characteristics.
Right, makes sense. I know Amir's going to have, I believe he'll have some input on the COVID side as well with XPRIZE, because they have quite a bit of activity there around that. Next question. If our governance structures would be ruled by AI, would our world be better or would we be doomed?
That would depend on the AI, now, wouldn't it? I mean, I think in the best case, a benevolent rational AGI would do a far better job of governance than human beings, because it can integrate all sorts of different data better than people can, and it doesn't have the sort of biased and twisted motivational system that evolution supplied us with. In the worst case, an AI could be even worse than, for example, the US's current leader, right? So it's up to us which AI collectively we build and put into that role.
It makes sense. Here's the next question. We have probably a couple more here. We actually have 5 more minutes. So, can we truly, you answered this a little bit in the last question. Can we truly have control over how AI will evolve? I know that you believe that.
Oh,
No. Okay, why don't you go into it?
done with that one. Next question. Yeah.
All right. How can we guarantee that it will stay benevolent when it exceeds our intelligence?
We can't.
Okay. If we're getting shorter with the answers.
However, intuitively, it seems sensible to me we could bias the odds. I mean, I have four human kids now, and I don't know how to guarantee they'll be benevolent either, but I hope I've been able to bias the odds in that direction.
Well, hopefully you can guarantee that mine will be benevolent. I would appreciate that. How's the capability to tap into the decentralized brain power of Singularity Net superior to current state-of-the-art AI software?
Well, at the current moment, Singularity Net is not as big as we would like it to be. So we haven't seen the really massive scale emergence of collective intelligence that we really designed the network to support yet. I would say now we have some individual AI agents in there, or small combinations that are superior just because of the algorithms inside them. So we've done a lot with our OpenCog AGI framework to bring symbolic reasoning AI together with neural and evolutionary AI. So we have some neural symbolic AI tools deployed in Singularity Net that are amazing at doing generalization and imagination. And we're using these in smart city projects, and we're using them for helping to personalize COVID therapeutics with Singularity Studio. But that's really because our team has amazing AI that we've put in small sets of AI agents into the Singularity Net. We haven't yet hit the threshold where you have, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of agents that collectively get an intelligence massively bigger than the sum of the parts. I mean, if you compare us to Google, we're still more where Google was in the year 2000 or something, where they had maybe better search algorithms than everyone else, but they hadn't achieved the massive superiority that comes from the scale they'd achieved. So our next step is to get to that scale.
I love it, Ben. Thank you so much for your time. I'm lucky enough to be able to ask you these questions whenever I can. There's never enough time to, but because we're so busy with our projects. But it's wonderful to have you here. Really appreciate your time, and I'm sure that there'll be questions that I'll be able to forward to you from the group after. So thank you very much.
Fantastic, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you.